Elena Hayes stood by the tall window of her marble-floored living room, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other clutching a lukewarm cup of tea she hadn't touched in over an hour. Outside, the winter sun filtered softly through the glass, casting long shadows over the oak wood floors. Inside, silence pressed against the walls like a thick fog. There was no laughter, no music, no footsteps, just the echo of wealth and the hollowness it often failed to fill. She should have been happy, at least that's what everyone told her. Married to Julian Carter, tech mogul, Forbes darling, the face of American innovation, Elena had everything most people dreamed of: a sprawling estate in Connecticut, a personal driver, a staff that anticipated her every need, and the security of a life untouched by financial strain. But that wasn't what she wanted. Not truly. What she wanted was for her husband to come home before midnight, to place his hand on her belly and smile when the baby kicked, to ask her how she was feeling, not through his assistant, but with his own voice, filled with love. Instead, he had been gone for 3 days. Julian claimed he was in San Francisco for meetings with potential investors. His emails were clipped, his calls rushed, and though Elena never said it aloud, she had begun to feel like an item checked off a list. Perfect wife, secured, before he moved on to the next shiny acquisition. She lowered herself into the armchair by the fireplace, ignoring the sharp pull in her lower back. The baby was kicking more these days, active, like Julian had been when they first met. Elena smiled faintly, remembering the version of her husband that had once danced with her, barefoot in a cramped New York apartment kitchen. Back when success meant a second-hand couch and instant ramen, but his eyes were always on her. Now, even when he was in the room, he felt 1,000 miles away. The next morning brought no call, no message, just more silence. Elena stirred her oatmeal without appetite, watching the spoon move through the bowl as if disconnected from her hand. The housekeeper, Maria, offered a gentle smile and asked if she wanted anything else. "No, thank you," Elena replied politely, though the warmth in her voice was forced. After breakfast, she wandered into the nursery. The walls were painted a soft cream, the crib a custom order made from maple wood. She ran her hand over the carved railing. The baby's name, Lucas, was already embroidered on tiny onesies stacked neatly in the dresser. She picked one up. "You'll be loved, little one," she whispered, her throat tight, "even if it's just me." The doorbell rang. Elena frowned. They weren't expecting anyone. Maria called out from the hallway, "It's Miss Grace, ma'am." Elena stepped into the foyer and blinked at the sight of Grace Hollander, her college roommate and now a marketing director at a high-end fashion firm in Manhattan. They hadn't seen each other in over a year. "Elena," Grace stepped forward, her tone unusually hesitant. "Can we talk? Privately?" Elena's heart thudded. Something was wrong. She led Grace into the sunroom, away from Maria's watchful eyes. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this," Grace said, setting her purse down with a trembling hand. "But you need to know. Julian was at the Ashford Gala last night, with someone else." Elena froze. "What do you mean, someone else?" Grace hesitated. "He brought a date, not a business associate, not a client, a woman. Her name's Sabrina Marlowe. She's a model, tall, brunette, 25. They arrived together, sat together, left together." Elena's lips parted, but no words came out. A buzzing filled her ears. "I didn't want to believe it either," Grace added quickly. "But I saw them myself, and—" She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, tapping it a few times before showing Elena the screen. There they were, Julian in a dark tuxedo, his arm around Sabrina's waist. Sabrina in a silver gown that clung to her body like a second skin. They were smiling, confident, oblivious to the camera, oblivious to everything except each other. Elena stared at the image. It felt like a knife pressed against her ribs. "I'm sorry," Grace whispered. "I thought you'd want the truth." For a long moment, Elena said nothing. Then she looked up, her voice steady but hollow. "Thank you. I'm glad you told me." Grace touched her hand gently. "Whatever you need, I'm here, and you deserve better. Don't ever forget that." That night, the Ashford Gala replayed on social media like a highlight reel of the elite. Photos, videos, news articles. Julian and Sabrina had made headlines. Tech tycoon seen with mysterious new flame. Elena sat alone in her dimly lit bedroom, phone in hand, staring at the betrayal over and over again. The part that hurt most wasn't even Julian's cheating. It was how shameless he had been, how public, as if her existence no longer mattered, as if she had become invisible. But she wasn't invisible. She was Elena Hayes Carter, and she hadn't married Julian without reading every line of the prenuptial agreement. She stood up, suddenly energized, and opened the safe behind the painting in Julian's study. Her hands moved quickly, retrieving the slim folder with the embossed seal. Carter Tech Holdings, legal documents. She flipped through the pages until she found the clause she remembered. Spousal co-ownership rights, contingent on her holding 10% of Carter Tech's early intellectual property patents. Gifted by Julian in their second year of marriage as a romantic gesture. At the time, he'd laughed and said, "Here's your name on the future of tech." He hadn't realized that gesture made her a voting stakeholder, one with leverage. A call to her family lawyer, Mr. Linden, confirmed it. "Elena, if you want to take action, now is the time," Mr. Linden said. "He's already making waves in the press. If you act fast, you can call an emergency board review." She exhaled, heart pounding. Do it. The gala, the scene of humiliation. The next evening, Elena made her entrance. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, golden linen, and the cold smiles of the wealthy. She wore a floor-length navy dress that hugged her pregnant figure, elegant and understated. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup flawless. She had spent the last 10 hours in a salon preparing, not to impress Julian, but to reclaim herself. Gasps followed her as she stepped in. Some people whispered her name, surprised she had come. Others averted their eyes. She saw him by the bar, Julian, laughing with Sabrina, a champagne glass in hand. When he turned and spotted Elena, his smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Elena," he said, walking over. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wasn't invited," she said smoothly. "But since my name's still on the company, I thought I'd drop by." Julian glanced around nervously. "This isn't the time." "Oh, I think it is." Sabrina slinked over, looping her arm through Julian's. "You must be Elena. I've heard—" "Nothing, actually." Elena smiled politely, then looked at Julian. "You should tell your mistress to enjoy tonight. It's probably the last one where you'll be the center of attention." "What's that supposed to mean?" Elena stepped forward, lowering her voice just enough to be heard by the nearby crowd. "I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, with majority shareholders. I still have my voting rights, remember? Turns out being boring has its benefits." Julian's face turned pale. "You wouldn't." "I already did." She walked away slowly, heels clicking against the marble floor, each step echoing like a declaration. The morning after, the corporate coup. At 9 a.m., Elena sat at the long, glossy conference table across from Julian and the board of Carter Tech. She was calm, collected, and very pregnant, yet commanding the room like a queen. Mr. Linden presented the case. Misuse of company funds to sponsor extravagant personal trips, Sabrina included. Deteriorating PR linked to scandal and breach of executive ethics. The board, mostly older, conservative men, was uncomfortable. Julian had brought shame and risked investor confidence. A vote was held. Julian was removed from his position as CEO. Elena abstained from voting, but the numbers were against him. He stormed out without looking back. That evening, Julian showed up at the estate, rage and confusion in his eyes. "You set me up." "No," Elena said. "You set yourself up. I just stopped covering for you." He looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time. "You'd really throw away everything we built?" She walked to the door and opened it. "You threw it away the moment you chose to humiliate me in public while I carried your child." "Elena, we'll figure out custody arrangements, but there's nothing left to say. Not anymore." He hesitated, then left. Elena closed the door. The lock clicked like punctuation. Days later, the tabloids spun with rumors. Power shift at Carter Tech. CEO ousted by pregnant wife in silent coup. But Elena didn't read them. She was busy getting to know herself again. She began working with women-led startups, investing in family-focused technologies. Her story became inspiration for women who had been silenced for too long. And when Lucas was born, she cradled him in her arms and whispered, "We did it." The first night home from the hospital was quiet, eerily so. Elena sat in the nursery, holding Lucas in her arms as the soft glow of the nightlight bathed the room in warmth. His tiny fingers curled instinctively around hers, and for the first time in months, she wept. Not from pain, not from betrayal, but from something deeper. Release. Everything had changed, and she was still standing. Julian hadn't shown up at the hospital. He'd sent flowers, white orchids, cold and immaculate, and a brief message. "Congratulations. Let me know when you're ready to talk." She hadn't replied. It wasn't revenge she sought. It was clarity. And now she had it. A new kind of morning, 3 weeks after giving birth, Elena stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping freshly brewed coffee and watching Lucas sleep in his bassinet nearby. The house felt different now, lighter. No longer a museum of someone else's ambitions, but a living space filled with real emotion and forward momentum. Maria walked in and smiled warmly. "You look well, ma'am." Elena smiled back. "I feel well." She did. For the first time in a long while, her days weren't dictated by Julian's schedule or his moods. She had established her own rhythm, feedings and diaper changes, early morning walks with Lucas in the park, reading again, something she hadn't done since law school. And in the quiet hours of the night, she began journaling, one truth at a time, reclaiming her voice on the page. The unexpected visit. One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the living room windows, the doorbell rang. It was Julian. He stood on the front step, clean-shaven, dressed casually, a rare departure from his usual curated image. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with years ago. But only for a moment. "Elena," he said quietly. She nodded but didn't smile. "Julian, I'd like to meet my son." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's asleep." He walked in slowly, taking in the house. Everything looked the same, but felt different. "You changed something," he murmured. "Number, I think you just don't recognize it when you're not at the center of it." He winced but said nothing. She led him to the nursery. Lucas stirred as Julian leaned over, his face softening into something unfamiliar. Humility. "He looks like you," Julian said. Number, he looks like himself. A silence stretched between them. "I never wanted to hurt you," he finally said. "I was afraid." "Of what?" she asked. "Of being ordinary, of losing the spark, of growing old with someone who didn't see me the same way anymore." She studied him. "So you chose someone who didn't really know you at all." He looked down. "I made mistakes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to say it." She nodded. "Thank you. That's all I needed." He looked surprised. "That's it?" "I'm not angry anymore, Julian. I'm tired, and I'm busy building something that doesn't revolve around your approval." There was no venom in her voice, only peace. He nodded slowly. "Can I visit him again sometime? We'll set a schedule, through our lawyers." He sighed. "I get it." As he turned to leave, she added, "One more thing." He paused. "Don't mistake my kindness for an invitation back into my life. You lost that privilege the night you humiliated me." He nodded again, and this time there was something final in his step as he walked away. A new beginning months passed. Elena's story had become a quiet legend in both legal and business circles, not because she destroyed Julian, but because she didn't. She didn't take the company for herself. She didn't run to the press. She simply took back her power and walked away. She launched a foundation in Lucas's name, the Hayes Initiative, which invested in maternal health startups and tech for working mothers. She became a guest lecturer at Columbia Business School, sharing not just financial wisdom, but life lessons rooted in dignity and discernment. The media tried to paint her as a scorned wife turned power player. But those who met her knew the truth. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply becoming herself. 1 year later, the sky was a brilliant blue over Cape Cod as Elena and Lucas walked hand in hand along the beach. He was just learning to toddle on his own, his little feet sinking into the sand as he giggled at the waves. Elena laughed, her sundress dancing in the breeze, her heart lighter than she ever thought it could be again. Behind her, the world she had built sparkled, not in gold or glass, but in love, legacy, and quiet courage. She had been broken. She had rebuilt, and she had rewritten the story not as the betrayed wife, but as the woman who saved herself.